He wasn't supposed to stop. The road stretched empty for miles, a thin ribbon of cracked asphalt cutting through the dry outskirts of Flagstaff, Arizona, where the late afternoon sun bled gold across the desert floor, and the wind carried nothing but dust and the faint scent of sunburned earth. And yet, there she was. A German shepherd stood in the middle of the road, still as a shadow that refused to move, her ribs faintly visible beneath a dull, unkempt coat, her amber eyes locked onto the approaching truck like she had been waiting for this exact moment, like she had chosen him. Ethan Walker eased his foot off the gas, the engine humming low as the truck rolled closer, gravel crunching under worn tires, his jaw tightening as he leaned forward over the steering wheel, scanning left, then right. No houses, no fences, no signs of life for at least half a mile, just open land and silence pressing in on all sides. "Come on, move," he muttered under his breath. Not unkindly, just tired, the kind of tired that lingers long after the uniform is folded away. But the dog didn't flinch, didn't bark, didn't retreat. She simply stood there, head slightly lowered, ears twitching in the wind, as if the entire world behind him no longer mattered. The truck came to a slow stop 10 feet away, engine idling, heat shimmering off the hood in soft waves, and for a moment neither of them moved, man and animal suspended in a quiet standoff that felt heavier than it should, like something unseen had settled between them. Ethan exhaled, long and steady, running a hand over his short-cropped hair before pushing the door open, boots hitting the ground with a dull thud, the dry air brushing against his face as he stepped forward cautiously, palms open, posture calm, the way he'd learned years ago in places where sudden movements meant consequences. "Hey, easy," he said, voice low, steady, but the dog didn't respond the way strays usually did. No flinch, no backward step. Instead, she took one slow step toward him, then stopped again, her gaze never leaving his. And there was something in it, something that didn't belong to fear or hunger alone, something deeper, heavier, like a question she didn't have the strength to ask twice. Ethan frowned slightly, glancing past her again, the horizon stretching empty and indifferent. Then back to her, noticing now the faint line around her neck where a collar used to be, the fur pressed flat in a thin circle that told a quiet story without words. He took another step. She didn't move. The wind shifted, carrying with it a faint metallic scent, almost lost in the dust, and for a split second something in his chest tightened, a memory he couldn't quite place tugging at the edge of his thoughts. But before he could follow it, the dog turned her head, just slightly, then looked back at him again, a small motion, almost nothing, except it wasn't nothing. It was an invitation, or maybe a plea. Ethan hesitated, the weight of old instincts pressing against the part of him that wanted to get back in the truck, drive on, leave this moment behind like so many others. But she stepped sideways then, just enough to block his path again, deliberate, unwavering, and the silence between them deepened. "You're really not going to let me go, are you?" he murmured, softer now, more to himself than to her, and somewhere beneath the words, beneath the dust and the fading light, something shifted, something quiet and stubborn that hadn't fully died, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he didn't turn back this time. The dog does not wait for him to decide again. She turns slow but certain and begins to walk off the road, her paws quiet against the dust, her body swaying just slightly with each step as if every movement costs more than it should, and after a few yards she stops, glances back over her shoulder, eyes finding his again, holding him there for a second that feels longer than it is, then continues. Ethan stands still, watching her go, the engine of his truck idling behind him like a reminder of the easier choice. The road ahead clear, predictable, empty, but something about the way she looks at him lingers, something that does not let go. He exhales slowly, glancing once toward the horizon, then back at her, and without saying anything more he follows. The ground shifts from asphalt to packed dirt, then to loose gravel that crunches under his boots. The air cooler here where the sun dips lower behind a line of rusted fencing and scattered debris, the kind of place people forget on purpose, we're old. Things are left to fade without being seen again. The dog moves ahead of him, not too fast, not too far, always just within reach of sight, as if she knows exactly how far he is willing to go before doubt pulls him back, and every few steps she checks again, waiting, making sure he is still there. The wind threads through broken metal and dry brush, carrying that same faint metallic scent stronger now, mixed with something else, something softer, almost like damp wood or old cloth left out too long, and Ethan feels it settle somewhere uneasy in his chest. "What are you trying to show me?" he murmurs, his voice quieter now, less guarded, the words drifting into the open air without expectation of an answer. But the dog's ears flick at the sound, her pace slowing just a fraction, as if she hears more than just the words. They pass a collapsed structure, little more than warped planks and a sagging roof. Then another stretch of open ground where weeds push stubbornly through cracked earth, and beyond that, half hidden behind a pile of discarded boards, something darker waits. The dog stops. This time she does not look back immediately. She stands there, still, her body tense but not afraid, her head lowered slightly toward the shape ahead. And when she finally turns to him again, there is something different in her eyes now. Something heavier, like the moment before a storm breaks, quiet but inevitable. Ethan slows his steps, his breathing more measured, every sense narrowing toward that single point, the world behind him fading into silence. And he notices now the way her tail stays low but not tucked, the way her posture holds steady despite the faint tremor in her legs, and it hits him then, not all at once, but enough to make him stop a few feet short. She is not leading him away from something. She is leading him to it. The wind shifts again, brushing past his face, carrying that scent stronger now, and this time he does not ignore it. He steps forward, one careful step after another, until he stands just behind her, close enough to see what she has been guarding, close enough to understand that whatever this is, it matters more than the road he almost chose. He has not stepped past her right away. Something in the air holds him there, the kind of quiet that feels earned, like a place that has been waiting to be seen, and when he finally shifts forward, it is slower now, more careful, his boots pressing into the dirt with measured weight as his eyes adjust to the shadows gathered beneath the broken boards. The shape ahead resolves into an old wooden crate, its sides warped and splintered. One corner collapsed inward, as if time itself had grown tired of holding it together, and beside it, half buried in dust and dry grass, lies a strip of fabric, faded, frayed at the edges, the color too washed out to name, but not forgotten by whatever left it behind. Ethan crouches slightly, his breath steady but shallow, and he notices the way the dog does not move closer, does not rush in. She simply stands behind him now, watching, as if this part belongs to him. The wind slips through the gaps in the wood with a low whisper, carrying a faint sound that almost escapes notice at first, something soft, uneven, like the smallest breath trying to hold on, and Ethan freezes, every muscle tightening not from fear, but from recognition. He knows that sound. He has heard it before, in places far from here, in moments where time slows and everything else fades except the fragile line between holding on and letting go. "Hey," he says quietly, not to the dog this time, but to whatever waits inside that broken space, his voice gentler than he expects, like he is afraid the air itself might shatter if he speaks too loudly. He reaches out, pushing aside a loose plank, the wood creaking softly under his touch, and, as the opening widens, the dim light slips inside, revealing movement, small and unsteady. 3 tiny shapes huddle together in the corner, their fur matted with dust, their bodies pressed close as if they have learned that warmth is something you create, not something you are given, and one of them lifts its head just slightly, eyes barely open, a faint sound escaping that is more breath than voice. Ethan exhales a long, quiet release that carries something heavier than relief, something closer to understanding, and he shifts closer, lowering himself to one knee, careful, deliberate, his hands hovering for a moment before he reaches in. The smallest one does not move much, just enough to show it is still there, still trying, and another leans weakly against it, as if even now they refuse to let go of each other. Behind him, the dog lets out a soft, almost silent whine, the first sound she has made since he met her, and it is not loud, not desperate, just present, like a truth that has been waiting its turn. Ethan glances back at her, meeting her eyes again, and this time he sees it clearly, not just exhaustion, not just hunger, but something deeper, something that has endured longer than it should have had to. She did not block his path to be saved. She blocked it because she had already chosen what mattered more. He looks back at the crate, at the fragile lives gathered inside it, and something inside his chest shifts, something old and quiet that he has kept buried under routine and distance. And for the first time since stepping off that road, he does not think about leaving. The air seems to grow thinner as he reaches inside, his hands steady but careful, fingers brushing against the rough edges of the crate before sliding beneath the smallest of the pups, lifting it just an inch off the ground, enough to feel the faint warmth still clinging to its body, fragile but present. And he exhales again, slower this time, like he is reminding himself that this moment is real, that it is not too late. The second pup shifts slightly, pressing closer to its sibling, a quiet instinct that speaks louder than any sound, and the third barely moves at all, its chest rising and shallow, uneven rhythm that makes Ethan's jaw tighten just enough to show what he does not say out loud. "All right," he murmurs, the word barely more than breath, but it carries weight now, a decision forming without hesitation, without room for doubt. He slips off his jacket, the fabric still warm from his body, and lays it gently inside the crate, creating a softer place than the splintered wood and dust they have known. Then one by one he lifts them, slow and deliberate, placing each small form onto the folded cloth, adjusting them just enough so they rest against each other, close, protected, as if that simple act could rewrite the hours they endured before he arrived. Behind him, the dog takes a step forward, hesitant at first, then another, her movements quieter now, less guarded. And when she reaches his side, she does not rush in or take over. She simply lowers her head near the edge of the crate, watching, her breath steadying as if she finally allows herself to believe what she sees. Ethan glances at her, just for a second, and nods slightly, not as a command, not as control, but as acknowledgement, like two strangers who understand something without needing to say it. The wind moves through the broken boards again, softer now, carrying less weight than before, and Ethan reaches into his pocket, pulling out his phone, the screen lighting up in the dim space, a small, modern glow against something far more ancient, the need to protect, to stay, to not walk away. His thumb hovers for a moment. Then he makes the call, voice low, controlled, giving directions, explaining just enough without letting the urgency spill over because he has learned that panic does not help anyone who needs saving. When he ends the call, he does not move right away, does not stand, does not rush. Instead, he stays there on one knee, one hand resting lightly on the edge of the crate, the other hovering just above the pups as if ready to steady them at the slightest shift. The dog inches closer, her shoulder brushing against his arm, a contact so light it could be missed if he were not paying attention. But he is, and he does not pull away. For the first time since she stepped into his path, her body relaxes, just a fraction, enough to show that something inside her has loosened its grip. Ethan looks down at the small lives gathered in his jacket, then out toward the fading light beyond the broken structure, and something settles in him, not loud, not dramatic, just certain. He is not leaving this place the same way he arrived, and neither are they. The minutes stretch quietly, measured not by clocks, but by the slow rhythm of fragile breathing and the soft movement of air through broken wood, and Ethan remains where he is, grounded in the dust, his presence steady in a way that feels deliberate, like he understands that leaving too soon would break something invisible but real. The sky outside shifts. Toward evening, the golden light fading into a cooler blue that seeps through the gaps in the structure, brushing over the crate and the small shapes resting inside his jacket, and for a moment the world feels suspended between what was and what might still be. One of the pups stirs again, a faint movement, its tiny paw pressing weakly against the fabric as if searching for something familiar, and Ethan gently adjusts the fold of the jacket, careful not to startle it, his fingers slow, practiced, carrying the kind of patience that does not come from training alone, but from knowing what it means to hold on when something could slip away. The dog watches closely, her head lowered near his shoulder now, her breath warmer, more even, and every so often her nose nudges the edge of the crate. Not pushing, just checking, just making sure. They're still here, he murmurs under his breath, more to reassure her than himself. And though she cannot understand the words, something in his tone reaches her, because she exhales softly, a long breath that carries weeks of tension out into the cooling air. In the distance, faint at first, comes the sound of an engine, low and steady, tires rolling over uneven ground, and Ethan lifts his head slightly, listening the sound growing closer, real, not imagined. And for a second, he closes his eyes, just a brief moment, like a silent acknowledgement that help is on its way. But he does not stand yet. He does not step away. Instead, he shifts closer to the crate, one hand resting lightly on the jacket, the other brushing gently along the edge of the wood, grounding himself in the moment, as if it matters that he stays until the very last second before anything changes. The dog moves then, just enough to press her side more fully against him, a quiet lean that carries trust without demand, and Ethan does not hesitate. He lets it happen, his shoulders steady against her weight, his presence unspoken but clear. The engine's sound grows louder now, closer, and soon headlights sweep across the open ground beyond the broken boards, cutting through the fading light. But inside this small space, nothing rushes, nothing breaks the calm they have built together. Ethan glances down one more time at the pups, watching the rise and fall of their tiny chests, and something settles deeper within him, something that feels less like relief and more like a promise he has not spoken out loud. When a vehicle finally comes to a stop and distant voices begin to call out, he does not answer immediately. He takes one last breath in the quiet, one last second in the stillness where nothing is expected and everything matters, and only then does he shift, preparing to stand, knowing that whatever happens next, this moment, this choice will not be undone. The voices outside grow, clearer, measured and calm, boots shifting over gravel, equipment doors opening and closing with soft, practiced efficiency, but inside the broken structure, time still moves differently, slower, as if unwilling to release what has already begun here. Ethan rises carefully to his feet, his knees stiff on the ground, but his movements remain controlled, deliberate, his focus never leaving the crate as he lifts it slightly, testing its balance, making sure the jacket holds steady around the small bodies within, and when he feels it settle securely in his hands, he exhales once, steadying himself for what comes next. The dog steps back just enough to give him space, but her eyes stay fixed on the crate, tracking every movement, every shift, and when he turns toward the open light, she follows without hesitation, her pace close to his side now, not leading, not guiding, just staying. As they step out from the shadow of the structure, the evening air feels cooler, cleaner, carrying the faint hum of the idling vehicle parked about 30 yards away, its headlights casting long beams across the uneven ground, illuminating the dust that lifts gently with each step they take. A man in a dark jacket approaches first, his posture alert but not rushed, hands visible, voice low and steady as he calls out, "You the one who made the call?" Ethan nods once, shifting the crate slightly in his arms, careful not to jostle it, and the man slows as he draws closer, his expression softening the moment he sees what Ethan is carrying. "Easy," the man says quietly, more to the situation than to Ethan, and he gestures toward the open back of the vehicle where a blanket has already been laid out, clean, prepared, as if someone anticipated exactly what they would find. Ethan steps forward, lowering the crate onto the blanket with the same care he has used from the beginning, his hands lingering for a moment longer than necessary before he lets go, and the second responder kneels beside it, checking gently, moving with the kind of precision that comes from experience without losing the softness required for something this small, this fragile. The dog remains close, her body angled slightly toward the crate, her ears flicking at every sound, but she does not interfere, does not panic. She simply watches, her presence quiet but unwavering. "We will take care of them," the responder says, glancing up briefly at Ethan, and there is no promise in his tone, just certainty, the kind that does not need to be spoken twice. Ethan nods again, but he does not step away, not yet, his gaze fixed on the small rise and fall of the pups' chests, as if memorizing it, as if grounding himself in proof that they are still here. The dog shifts closer then, pressing lightly against his leg, and this time when he looks down at her, he reaches out, his hand resting gently against the side of her neck, fingers brushing over the faint mark where a collar once was, and she does not pull back, does not tense. She leans into it just slightly, enough to show that something has changed. The night begins to settle around them, the sky deepening overhead, and as the responders continue their quiet work, Ethan stands there, not as someone passing through, but as someone who stayed long enough to matter, and in that stillness, without words, without anything dramatic, a bond takes shape, not built on ownership or command, but on a moment where neither of them walked away. The back doors of the vehicle close with a soft, final sound that echoes more deeply than it should. And for a moment Ethan just stands there, his hands empty now, the weight he carried gone but not entirely released, as if something invisible still rests in his palms. The responders move with quiet coordination, one stepping into the driver's seat while the other give a brief nod toward Ethan. A simple acknowledgement before the engine hums a little louder and the headlights shift direction, preparing to pull away. And as the vehicle begins to roll, the beam of light sweeps across the ground one last time, catching the outline of the broken structure, the scattered boards, the place where everything changed. The dog watches it go, her body still, her ears tilted forward, tracking the movement until the sound fades into the distance and the night settles back into place, quieter now, emptier in a way that feels different from before. Ethan exhales slowly, the air leaving his chest heavier than he expects, and he runs a hand over the back of his neck, glancing once toward the road he came from, then back toward the dog, who has not moved, who now stands in the open space with nothing left to guard, nothing left to hold her in place. For a second, it seems like she might turn and disappear into the darkness the way strays often do, slipping back into the edges of the world where no one follows. But she does not. She stays. Her gaze shifts to him, steady, searching, and there is no urgency in it now, no silent plea, just a question that lingers without pressure. Ethan meets her eyes, and something in his expression softens, not dramatically, not all at once, but enough to be seen if you were looking for it. "You did good," he says quietly, his voice carrying across the small distance between them. Simple words, but grounded in something real, something earned, and the dog's ears flick slightly at the sound, her posture easing just a fraction more. The wind brushes past them again, cooler now as night takes hold, carrying the faint scent of earth and distance, and Ethan takes a step toward his truck, then stops, glancing back at her without fully turning, as if giving her the choice he knows matters. She hesitates, just for a second, her paws shifting against the dirt, her body caught between instinct and something new, something unfamiliar, and then she takes a step forward, then another, closing the space slowly, not rushing, not afraid, just choosing. Ethan opens the passenger side door, the hinge creaking softly in the quiet, and steps back, giving her room, not calling, not commanding, simply waiting, and after a brief pause, she climbs in, her movements careful but certain, settling onto the seat as if she has already decided where she belongs for now. Ethan watches her for a moment, then nods to himself, closing the door gently before walking around. To the driver's side, the night stretching out ahead of them, wide and uncertain, but no longer empty. When the engine starts, it sounds different somehow, not louder, not stronger, just steadier. And as the truck pulls back onto the road, the headlights cutting through the darkness, the space beside him is no longer vacant, and neither is the silence that follows. The road hums softly beneath the tires as the truck moves through the quiet stretch of highway, the headlights carving a narrow path through the darkness while the rest of the world fades into shadow. And inside the cab, the silence settles in a different way now. Not empty, not heavy, just present. The dog sits in the passenger's seat, her body angled slightly toward the window at first, watching the passing darkness with alert but calmer eyes, her ears twitching at distant sounds that never quite reach them. And every so often she glances toward Ethan, quick, almost unnoticed, as if checking that he is still there, that this is real. Ethan keeps his hands steady on the wheel, his posture relaxed but focused, the kind of control that comes from years of driving long roads with too many thoughts and not enough answers. And for a while, neither of them makes a sound, the only rhythm coming from the engine and the quiet rush of air outside. After a few miles, he reaches over slowly, not looking directly at her, his hand moving with quiet intention until it rests gently against the side of her neck again, fingers brushing lightly over her fur. And this time she does not hesitate. She leans into the touch more fully, her body shifting closer by just a few inches, enough to close the space that once separated them. "You are safe now," he says, his voice low, steady, and though the words are simple, they carry something deeper, something that is not just for her. And she exhales softly, her eyes lowering slightly, as if the tension she carried has finally found a place to rest. The town lights begin to appear in the distance, faint at first, then growing clearer as they approach, a soft glow spreading across the horizon. And Ethan slows the truck as he turns onto a quieter road, one lined with modest homes and still yards, the kind of place where nothing urgent happens. And everything moves at its own pace. He pulls into a small driveway, the gravel crunching softly beneath the tires, and shuts off the engine, the sudden quiet wrapping around them like a pause between moments. For a second, neither of them moves. Then Ethan reaches for the door, stepping out into the cool night air, the scent of dry grass and distant wood lingering faintly, and he walks around to the passenger side, opening the door without hurry. The dog remains still at first, her eyes scanning the unfamiliar space, the dim porch light, the outline of the house, the quiet stillness that holds no threat but no history either. And Ethan steps back, giving her room again, the same way he did before, no pressure, no command, just presence. She shifts forward slowly, placing one paw onto the ground, then another, her body lowering as she steps out, her movements cautious but no longer driven by fear. And when all four paws meet the gravel, she pauses, looking around once more before turning back to him. Ethan nods slightly, the corner of his expression softening again, and he gestures gently toward the porch, the light casting a warm glow across the wooden steps. She follows, not closely, not yet, but willingly, and as they move toward the house together, the distance between them continues to close in ways that do not need to be spoken, only felt, and for the first time since the road, since the crate, since everything that came before, there is no urgency left in her steps, only quiet, steady trust beginning to take root. The porch light hums softly above them, casting a warm circle onto the wooden boards as Ethan pushes the door open, the hinges giving a quiet creak that feels almost like a welcome, and he steps inside without rushing, leaving the door open behind him, a silent invitation rather than a command. The dog lingers at the threshold, her body still, her eyes scanning the interior where shadows stretch across simple furniture and familiar walls, a space that carries no threat, but also no memory of her. And for a moment she does not move, caught between instinct and something new she has not yet learned to trust fully. Ethan sets his keys down on a small table near the door, the soft clink breaking the silence just enough to ground the moment, and he turns back slightly, not calling her in, not reaching out, just standing there with the same steady presence he has held since the road, since the crate, since the first time she chose to stop him instead of disappear. "It is okay," he says quietly, his voice carrying no pressure, only space, and after a second that stretches longer than it should, she steps forward, one paw crossing the threshold, then another, her body low, but not fearful, her movements careful as she enters the room and pauses just inside, listening, feeling, adjusting. The door closes softly behind her, sealing out the night, and the quiet that follows is different now, enclosed, warmer, the kind that allows something to settle. Ethan moves toward the kitchen without urgency, filling a metal bowl with water and setting it down near the wall, then stepping back again, giving her room, and she approaches slowly, her steps measured, her head lowering as she drinks, not rushed, not desperate, just steady, as if she finally has time. He watches her for a moment, then pulls a folded blanket from a nearby chair, laying it out on the floor a few feet away, smoothing it once with his hand before stepping back again, always leaving space, always letting her choose. She finishes drinking and looks around once more, her eyes softer now, less guarded, and after a brief pause, she moves toward the blanket, circling once before lowering herself onto it, her body easing down in a way that suggests she has not rested like this in a long time. Ethan leans lightly against the wall, arms crossed loosely, watching without staring, his breathing slow, matching the quiet rhythm that fills the room. And for a while nothing happens, no sudden change, no dramatic shift, just the gradual release of tension that is nowhere left to hold on. The dog lifts her head once more, looking at him across the small distance. And in her eyes there is no longer a question, no longer a plea, just recognition, simple and clear. Ethan nods once, almost to himself, and lowers his gaze, giving her that final piece of peace. And after a few seconds, she rests her head down onto the blanket, her eyes closing slowly, her body still. Outside, the wind moves gently through the trees, distant and soft, but inside, everything is still, grounded, held together by something quiet and unseen. And in that silence, without words, without promises spoken aloud, two lives that almost passed each other by settle into a moment of grace that does not need to be explained. In this deeply moving cinematic journey, a U.S. Marine encounters an abandoned German Shepherd on a quiet Arizona road, setting in motion one of the most powerful animal stories about trust, redemption, and silent loyalty ever told. What begins as a simple interruption quickly unfolds into one of those unforgettable animal stories where a desperate act becomes a life-saving connection. As the dog leads the Marine into a forgotten place, hiding fragile lives that refuse to give up through subtle gestures, quiet tension, and emotionally grounded storytelling. This narrative captures the essence of animal stories that remind us how compassion often arrives without words, only through presence and choice. As the Marine steps beyond hesitation and into responsibility, the bond between man and dog evolves naturally, reflecting the core of meaningful animal stories where healing is mutual and earned through patience rather than force, with realistic pacing, authentic emotional progression, and a deeply human portrayal of connection. This story stands among the most resonant animal stories that highlight how even the smallest act of mercy can restore something lost. From a dusty roadside encounter to a quiet home filled with new trust, the journey reflects the timeless truth that sometimes the ones who need saving are the ones who end up saving us. And in that stillness between a Marine and a German Shepherd, something unspoken becomes permanent, something gentle becomes powerful, and something broken finds its way back to grace. Character 1. A 35-year-old white U.S. Marine, rugged face, short military haircut, light stubble, strong jawline, wearing worn tactical jacket and boots, calm, serious expression, front-facing portrait, natural lighting, realistic texture, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Character 2. A 4-year-old female German Shepherd, sable coat with black saddle and tan legs, lean but slightly underweight body, alert amber eyes, ears upright, full body standing pose, front-facing view, natural. Ligation, realistic for detalhe, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration.